Evening and Hare Krishna. Welcome to our conversation with Govinda on Spaces. So today we'll be discussing about veganism and vegetarianism. While we all know that vegetarianism existed since time immemorial, veganism as a concept started possibly half a century back in Europe. Vegetarianism is a concept which existed in our scriptures, while veganism didn't. Our gods consumed milk, had butter. So we would like to know uh, how does our scriptures think about veganism? And let's hear it from Prabhuji, who has a deep understanding of our scriptures and its relevance to our present day life. I'm sure we'll have some questions towards the end of the conversation. Kindly tap on the mic icon, which is at the bottom left of your screen, and we'll pull you into the conversation at an appropriate time. With these words, thank you very much. Over to you, Prabhuji.
Hare, uh, Hare Krishna, just one thing. Request everyone to just share there is a tweet button. Just share that. Tweet it to all people on your friends circle on Twitter. We'll also get to know about this event. So just do that for a second before and Govind you can start now. Thank you.
Thank you, Brajmohan and Deepak Bhavani for allowing me to speak on this platform. Veganism or vegetarianism. In the one of the scriptures, Bhagavatam, first canto, there is a very interesting concept presented, and the books like Bhagavatam, the granthas of the Bhagavatam, they are actually beyond the realm of interaction in this world. But still, they mention something which is very, very foundational. It is not only principle centric, but it is also application reality. The word you must have heard, jivo, jivasya jivana. It explains those who are devoid of hands are a prey for those who have hands. Those devoid of legs are a prey for the four-legged. The weak are the subsistence of the strong, and the general rule holds that one living being is food for another. Right? So what does it talk about? It talks about apparently Darwinian theory, survival of the fittest. When it is seen from a simple perspective, when we see around the nature, this is the reality, the survival of the fittest. But if you go deeper into the same text, it takes us to the concept of cooperation, not exactly consuming one living entity by other living entity. Even if you're a vegetarian, what this verse also says, even if you're a vegetarian, you are actually dependent on so much of other living entities to give you their energy. It is not only the flesh. A mother, when she feeds her baby a breast milk, in one sense, the child is sucking the energy of the mother to survive. But in this survival, there is no destruction of the mother. There is the nourishment of the child by receiving the energy, and there is the nourishment of the mother by giving. So, therefore, keeping this as the foundational principle of our discussion, we will try to analyze the concept of veganism and vegetarianism. When you see the vegan concept started in 1920, 1930, as Deepakji explained. And now, because the veganism is growing, it is seen that global vegan food market now expect to grow each year by nearly 10%. In 2026, it will reach $24 billion only in America. And this has encouraged the agricultural industries to make so many products based on the plant. So when you study the veganism started in the Western world, which is very good because at one point of time the meat industry, the kind of industrialization has been done with the animals. No, it is unbelievable. And the nature's reality, the human reality is whenever you go to one extreme, then what does it do? It brings out the antithesis, brings out the exactly opposite of that. What is it? Extreme degree of abhorsion, abhorration against, we abhor it. The people who are practicing vegan, almost everyone in the Western world happen to be coming from a hardcore meat eating family, not once a week, not twice a week, not thrice a week, but that was their meal, morning, afternoon, evening, right? So therefore, it is but natural the industrialization of the meat product has given rise to extreme degree of aversion to that. If you study again in the 15th, 14th century, because of the faith-centric, institutionalized faith-centric religion in the Western world, at some point of time within the religion, it gave rise to Protestant. The word Protestant meant I protest the system of Catholicism. They did not give up Christianity. They protested. When the Protestant and Catholicism became deeper system, it gave rise to the Renaissance movement, where atheism became a system. It became a cult, right? It became a cult. So similarly, the vegan in the Western world, it's a very good thing that people are actually become conscious of becoming vegetarian. As long as it talks about becoming clean, non-violent, consuming less from the mother nature, it's a beautiful concept. But the problem is the vegan doesn't stop there. The veganism doesn't stop there. Basically, it takes the psychology of cultism and it actually challenges the very foundation of cooperative living. When the animals are also want to contribute, when you make the animals as the object of your so-called compassion, you take away their ego of contribution. And this is the place where vegetarianism differs from veganism. The vegetarianism was never a cult, it's a culture. And veganism has the problem of becoming a cult to such an extent that everything will be seen, your scriptures, your Dharma granthas, will be seen from a vegan perspective. And what is the vegan perspective? I think I told in one of my talks. I remember one vegan student came and she asked this question. She said, how can you use the bull in the field? How can you ride on the horses? How can you use the dogs for guarding your house, making it stay outside? So when you hear this kind of thing, you feel, wow, how much compassion they have. So veganism takes the superior position of being, I am the deliverer, I am there for you. They don't need you. They are empowered being also. They may not talk to human beings, but they want to contribute to the human beings also. Exploitation of them is bad, but not allowing contribute is another kind of exploitation, and that to such an extent that everything will be seen, your scriptures, your Dharma granthas, will be seen from a vegan perspective. And what is the vegan perspective? I think I told in one of my talks. I remember one vegan student came and she asked this question. She said, how can you use the bull in the field? How can you ride on the horses? How can you use the dogs for guarding your house, making it stay outside? So when you hear this kind of thing, you feel, wow, how much compassion they have. So veganism takes the superior position of being, I am the deliverer, I am there for you. They don't need you. They are empowered being also. They may not talk to human beings, but they want to contribute to the human beings also. Exploitation of them is bad, but not allowing contribute is another kind of exploitation, and that is the problem with veganism. I'll give an example. In the Ramayana, we see the army of Lord Ram, driven by the horses, driven by the elephant, driven by the bulls to carry a lot of food material. If you're a staunch vegan, you will see only violence there. You will see the behavior of Lord Ram, behavior of the Pandavas, behavior of Lord Krishna, milking the cows, drinking the cow's milk, feeding the cow's milk to everybody, drinking the yogurt, making into butter, feeding everybody. That will all be seen as an exploitation, because it has an isolated view. So, vegan as a habit is beautiful, but vegan as a psychology is a dangerous to your ancestors also. You must have heard the famous news of the divorce of Rajnikant's daughter and a famous actor. All right, they have separated. Few famous celebrities have separated in their marriage, and there is one human being who happens to be a human being in the guise of a human being. He has made many tweets on this separation. One of the tweets he says, he's the director of the film. He says, marriages are made in the hell and divorces are made in the heaven. He said our ancestors, he doesn't stop them calling us ancestor. He calls our cruel ancestors designed this concept of marriage. No, it should be done with. He said the divorce should be celebrated with Sangeet. The divorce should be, and if you see that tweet, you realize one thing is becoming angry about his tweet. Another thing is to be concerned. Right, the way that divorces are presented, the way it is made, there is absolutely no problem people divorcing. We don't need Ram Gopal Verma to tell. I can show you so many scriptural references wherein incompatible marriages are allowed to be separated. Huh? But they did not make a issue about it. The separation in the marriage did not question the concept of marriage itself. And this is the problem with veganism. You know, the problem doesn't stop with the food. Food is the concept of, non-violence. Again, I would also present my personal view. Bringing from the scriptural perspective only, the the problem of being a vegetarian is not a problem. And problem, the concept of non-vegetarian, the traditional non-vegetarian is also not problem for the Shastras. No? When you become a cultist vegetarian, turning into vegan, consciously or unconsciously, one becomes intellectually, mentally violent against the non-vegetarians. And this is not acceptable even from a human psychology, and what to speak of sensitive scriptures. Right. So therefore, when we go back to this verse, Jivo Jivasya Jivanam, the cooperation is so profound. And therefore, in the scripture, the cooperation lie between the animals and the human being was so good. In the Mahabharata, not in one place, twice. It is fascinating. All the environmentalists look into how Yudhishthira Maharaj had a great connection to the animals. Why they were moving from one forest to another forest continuously. As a Kshatriyas, right? As a Kshatriyas, it was their responsibility to have the courage to attack. A controlled attack against the aggressor is the responsibility of a Kshatriya. And because of that, reluctantly, they would go for hunting. Now, if you become a hardcore vegan, immediately Yudhishthira Maharaj becomes a butcher as much as somebody is butchering in the commercial ranches and the slaughterhouses, because the vision is very isolated without even getting into the details. So when Yudhishthira Maharaj was in the forest, they would go and hunt as the Kshatriyas. How much? Very restricted hunting. Why would they hunt? Two reasons. One is for developing their courage, and second is the forests were not away from the civilizational. Now, also, if you go to some of the remote villages, like recently, I had gone to one school, and this is in Saputara, right on the up on the highway on the little mountain top. It's a girls, Adivasi school, and the head of the school, she said, just few days back the tiger had come there. Now this is the present situation. Civilization is separated from the forest. Forget that. If you go to Bombay in our the national park, the Borivali National Park, right? So many people who live close to that national park, many times they have talked about the wild animals suddenly coming into their compound, their garden, killing the dogs sometime, taking away the babies also. If this is the condition today, now at this stage also, you can imagine when the civilization was so closely connected to the forest area, right? The wild animals would destroy the crops. The wild animals would kill the wild animals would pick up the human beings also. And you have to understand the wild animals also have the sensitivity. If they realize that nobody is stopping us, they can come and attack to our entire village. Therefore, there is a concept of monkey on the stick, right? Similarly, if the wild animals realize there is a resistance against our intrusion, there is a resistance against our intrusion, then they would not come as much, they would come without that resistance. Therefore, hunting would stop them from intruding into the cities and the villages. And these animals themselves told Yudhishthira Maharaj, they could communicate to him. He said, look, you have stayed enough in this forest, and there is an imbalance which is happening in this forest. Now you move away from this place. So what is Yudhishthira Maharaj? Is a sensitive hunter, is a reluctant hunter. There is no obsession of hunting, but hunting cannot be avoided by him. And just imagine, you tend to be hardcore vegan, it is but guaranteed that you will see the whole behavior, activities of the Pandavas. Lord Ramachandra, same thing. I remember in the marriage ceremony, there are connective things what you're supposed to do in the marriage. The ritual, the relationship, the vows, the interactions, everything is so beautiful. It enhances the whole aspect of marriage, right? And one of the most important part of the marriage is yajna. In that yajna, there is no alternative. You cannot have a fire on the computer. You cannot have the fire with a petrol. You cannot use diesel. There is no question of alternative energy for letting up the Agni in the Agni Sanskar. You have to have pure cow's ghee only. Yes, it is the responsibility of the family to get those ghee which is as non-violent as possible, where it is not coming from the factory sources, where the animals, the cows are not given torture. And I've seen it personally. We carried some ghee, right? And for a marriage ceremony, the both boy and girl were so adamant. They said, no, no, we do not want, we are pure vegans. So what happened? That they were so strongly resisting of using the ghee which is coming from cow, which is given so much of love and affection. Basically, they were rejecting the contribution of Gomata for their auspicious marriage. Right? So when you say we are against exploitation, does not make us against the whole contribution principle only. Right? So therefore, we see that if somebody asks me this question, whom do you...
Prabhuji, I think we're not able to hear you well.
Hello?
Yeah, now it's better, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Yeah, I said, if somebody asks me this question, who is better? A vegan who is a rabid vegan, the conscious sensitive vegan who says, no, I'm vegan as long as I don't get fewer cow products, then they are more like a vegetarians, right? They don't have to call themselves as a vegan. But if somebody is so rabid, cultist vegan to the extent where he questions everything their ancestors did, like this person talking about cruel ancestor perform this marriage ceremony. If you read the tweet, you'll feel sad for him, no, angry against him, right? That he is like a baby along with the bath water is throwing and calling marriage is hell and divorce is a heaven. Sangeet should be having for the divorce, and people will take them seriously also, because so many marriages are breaking amongst the so-called sophisticated people who are so much in love with each other, right? And they are making such a nice tweet about breaking with their marriages also. We'll do co-parenting, all these things. What does it do? It questions your traditions only. So if somebody asks me this question, I would say I would prefer a traditional non-vegetarian to a modern cultist vegan. After making this statement, let us go back to the scripture. Let us go back to how in India I was raised in a non-vegetarian family, but I call myself in the past, not then, now, today. Somebody asks, what was your food habits? I would say I was a semi-vegetarian and semi-non-vegetarian. How is that? Because even those who were non-vegetarians, they were non-vegetarians not because of fashion. They were non-vegetarians because of their surrounding. And even though that surrounding was there, they never intrude into the life of vegetarian people. And the vegetarian people would never create a ruckus about you being non-vegetarian. My house and our shop was owned by the Brahmanas, pure vegetarian Brahmins. But they allowed, and it is not only one, so many colonies were like that. They allowed the non-vegetarians also to stay there. You may say, "Arey, but because they wanted money for the rent." What is the rent? 18 rupees was the rent. 20 rupees was the rent. So there was no financial benefit for them giving us. The the problem was not vegetarian or non-vegetarian. The problem was good behavior or not good behavior. That was their major concern, right? And if you go back to the scripture, when you go back to the scripture, Manu, one of the greatest authority, if you read his books, how beautifully explained when you read the whole concept of vegetarian and non-vegetarian. The problem what the people do, those who fight against each other, the vegetarian and non-vegetarian, they pick up those verses which is supporting vegetarianism in Manu Samhita. And the people who are now the modern term, it was not there previously. Those who are hardcore vegetarians now becoming vegan, they take verses from the Manu Samhita to prove no, Manu is against meat. But they are not seeing in the integration. Manu begins for those people who had the habit, who had no other sources of food, they were consuming meat. You know, he doesn't discourage them. In fact, he allows them to eat meat. He facilitates their meat eating by adding certain principle of yagya. Right? When they, rather than making them non-vegetarian away from certain yagya, adding yagya to that would make them more and more refined. Now, just see, when people see this, there are two views. One may say, "What is this puja?" They're doing puja, but they're killing the animals, right? That is the perspective of a immature vegetarian who had taken to the path of spirituality. Oh, this is bogus. What is the point of doing all this puja? But are we not supposed to go back and ask the people who supported them from the Shastra only, the rishis? The rishis are saying yes, yes. But the point is that is not the way you talk to them. It is easier for you to tell them to become vegetarian, but will you provide them all the resources for them to become a vegetarian? Right? If they don't have the resources, you don't have the right to give them instruction without providing that resources. So the rishis in the back, they were very sensitive with the philosophy, because philosophy The life is not there for philosophy. Philosophy is there for life. It's very important principle. So therefore, Bharadwaj Rishi, the great student of Valmiki Maharshi, who learned of the entire Valmiki Ramayana. Who is Bharadwaj Rishi? He's a Vipra. He's a Brahmana. And you read their eating habits also, what kind of eating habits they had. When Bharata's army came to his ashram, what did he do? There was different kinds of food. There were people from those background who are non-vegetarian. Valmiki Maharshi does not hesitate. There is no need to give any interpretation to say, no, no, this is actually not a meat. Very clear. It explains. Those who know little Sanskrit, they will understand. He provided them with the meat of peacock. He provided with the meat here, and he provided them the meat of rabbit. Now, if you're a vegan, you will call Bharadraj Rishi hypocrite. If you're a vegan, you will call Valmiki Maharshi hypocrite. If you're a vegan, you will call Narad Muni hypocrite also. Because Narad Muni, when he met that hunter, Mrigari, right? When he met the Mrigari hunter, what did he tell him? He said, Beta, look. He said, don't kill this animal half, kill them fully. What that person asked, you can imagine he was so desensitized, that Mrigari hunter. He said, what is the difference between killing half or full? Does it make any difference? So Narad Muni told him only this much. It makes a difference. If you kill them half, they suffer more. If you kill them fully, they suffer less. You can imagine Narad Muni being a vegan, coming from America and meeting a Murgari hunter. What will you do? He will give him few curses. If you have the choices, he will take away everything from him as a protest. Right? He will cause violence to his profession and give him all the curses and make him starve without providing a facility for a progress. And therefore, when Manu or Bharadraj Rishi or Valmiki Maharshi or Vyasadeva for that matter, when they understand the psychology of people, what they would do, they said, okay, add some yagya to it. I remember when I was very young, I was in third or fourth standard, and I hardly went to my village. And one of the time I had gone to this village, there is a festival called as Bandi Habba. I'm sharing this. And one of my cousin took me to that festival. We had to take something. Large crowd. There was a temple, and he had taken two chicken. That's the only time he ate chicken. No? So he took that two chicken, offered it to the Lord, the form of Lord Shiva, and they slaughtered in one go. I can't forget that sight. Removed the head and gave the rest of it to us. So for many years it was like, what kind of festival this? This is the bogus festival. How can they do like that? That was my approach. But after reading Ramayana, reading Mahabharata, reading Bhagavad, right? Krishna in the 11th canto adds Dharma Vyada. Dharmic butcher. Is it possible like that? Such a contradictory word. Right? Dharma Vyada is added in the list of so many great people, the gopis, the Brahman Patnis, Vibhishan, and also Dharma Vyada. Why? Because that is the reality. Jivo se jivanam. For some people, animal is a food. And higher than that, it is a cooperative life. So therefore, when I saw from another perspective, I said, wow, those who are meat eaters, at least they are doing some puja. At least they are seeing it as a sacrifice. And that is what Manu is speaking. And his conclusion is, you evolve from here to there. When you evolve from here, from being a non-vegetarian, evolve becoming a vegetarian, the whole process is very organic. It is not cult-centric. It is not violence in your thought process. It is not isolated, opinionated. It's a very organic opinionated. And therefore, you see, that there are not much discussion in the Sanatan Dharma in regards to focusing on the battle between the vegetarians and non-vegetarians. You don't see that. There is no debate about this. Right? What happened was, with the arrival of two hardcore vegetarian path, the Jains and the Buddhists. No, So the Nara, the words were Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. Right, it is there in the Mahabharata. Ahimsa Paramo Dharma is there. Because ultimately that is the reality of human existence. But to reach that reality, we have to understand the reality of the creation also. Right? You cannot make the entire world into vegetarians. You can never make the entire world into vegan. Because Jivo Jivasya Jivanam is there. Right? So therefore our ancestors, so what happened was, now very interesting. If you're a beggar, you are for a bhikshu, from a Sanatan Dharma, if you're a bhikshu, you would go to people's house to beg. The number of people who were those kind of beggars was very less. In fact, there was one very nice lady, the teacher Indumati Kaddare, she was telling, 1,000 or 100 families had the responsibility of caring for one Brahmana, one sannyasi. It was the responsibility of the society. Now imagine when large number of people became bhikshus, right? A 100 people's village had to be burdened by 10 bhikshus, the Buddhist bhikshu, the Jain bhikshus. So what does it do? It creates imbalance. The Jains remain hardcore vegetarians. But with Buddhist followers, it's very intriguing. Again, I had to say, how can they eat meat? So Lord Buddha and his followers wanted to spread the Buddhism. When you start something with new, there is a vigor. There is this passion to spread your words, your guru's word, your teacher's word. Now they couldn't afford to go and beg from people that we want pure vegetarian only. So Lord Buddha said, don't cause inconvenience to people where you beg. Whatever comes in your plate, accept it. Huh? So what happened when there is an imbalance between where there is an abundant available of vegetarian food and there is no availability, so they went to anywhere and everywhere. And interesting, Lord Buddha vigorously presented ahimsa philosophy, but he was not necessarily vegetarian. He's not necessarily vegetarian. There are so many stories of he also consuming meat. And one of the topmost authority, Dalai Lama, for your information, he's the head of the entire Buddhistic cult. You go in their website and see, whenever Dalai Lama travels, wherever he travels, he preaches non-violent philosophy, but in his plate there is a meat. Only when he comes to Dharmashala, he would not. Now, if you study carefully, where did they grow up? They're part of the Tibetan civilization. If you're a Tibetan, if you go to Tibet and you're expecting to get all the Gujarati food, khandwa, handwa, then what is that? Patra, right? And then jalebi and ghati jalebi, bundi, all this item. You can easily practice that in Gujarat, but if you're a Gujarati in the Tibet, it is extremely impossible because the mountainous Himalayan land does not offer you all that thing for you to survive. That was the background, that is the conditioning, right? When he came to India, he has changed. So, therefore, it is very important to see through the sensitive eyes. And therefore, our people did not. Our bhikshukas were less in number, and therefore, they were able to practice pure vegetarianism. So therefore, Dalai Lama preaches non-violence, but not necessarily vegetarian. And our Krishna and Lord Ramachandra, they are pure vegetarians. You don't find anywhere. Sometimes people say Lord Ram ate meat. Show us. Because in the Valmiki Ramayana, when he was practicing 14 years of Vanvas, he was not supposed to eat cooked food. What Lord Ramachandra ate is explained by Valmiki Maharshi. Right. So just because Valmiki Ramayana speaks about feeding meat product to the warriors, people extend, they try to push, no, Ram also ate because he was hunting, therefore he was eating. Doesn't make sense. It's illogical. Right. And then secondly, with Lord Krishna, we know what he was eating, what was his taste. Right. Krishna is a vegetarian, but not necessarily rabid, non-violent. Right. He would say to the Kauravas, he told Duryodhan, हम अहिंसा के पुजारी है, परंतु हिंसा को उपकरण बनाने को जानते हैं. We are the worshipper of non-violence, but we can make violence as an instrument for establishing stability in this life. Right? So therefore, see the dynamics of vegetarianism. Right? So therefore, when originally the travelers from Portuguese traveler, they came to India, Kerala they came, the land of what is happening in Kerala now. They came to Kerala. There is a book called as Bloodless Revolution. So my problem is not about veganism. It's very good. My problem is the attitude the veganism develops. No, it destroys the cooperative living. Repeatedly, I'm telling that. But a vegetarianism was not like that. It cooperatively lives. If there is a need for the horse, it will use. If there is a need for a donkey, it will use. If there is a need for the cow's milk, which is there is a need, it will use. But at the same time, provide limitless affection to the cow. I'm last few months I'm staying in a goshala, just next to a goshala. Right, the owner of the goshala, has the courage to say, "I will give two thun." That is how the scripture says. The first two thun, you know, dohan. Isliye it is called as dohan, means two udder is given to the calf. Drink as much as it want, and two for the human beings. There is no problem for the cows. Cows will be very happy to do that because it is taking service from the human being. And no living entity in this world, for your information, no living entity in this world want to only take and take and take, and only give and not take from them. You are basically destroying their identity. It is as bad as being a violent human being. All right. So therefore, when we make this concept, it is better to be a traditional non-vegetarian than to be a rabid psychologically impacted vegan. Right? Why? Because they will cause everywhere the problem of seeing everything from only being vegan. Right. So therefore, when the Portuguese came to India, to Kerala, and when they saw the Brahmins and other people, they said, "Wow, these are such a good Christians. They are abstaining from all kinds of meat product." I'll read something from there. The Portuguese soon realized that these Christians were not entirely ordinary. They not only ate no beef, but when Digama and his men arrived at the Calicut court for dinner, the famous Vasco da Gama, or infamous, they found that in the startling contrast to the lavish banquets of European royalty, the king eats neither meat nor fish, nor anything that has been killed, nor do his barons, courtiers, or other persons of quality. For they say that Jesus Christ said in his law that he who kills shall die. Now they consider our rishis as Jesus Christ. Okay. While the Portuguese remained under the delusion that the Indians were Christians, they were more than willing to integrate local vegetarianism into the biblical commandment against killing, and noted with amazement that it was actually perfectly possible for humans to live without eating meat. But Digama and his men gradually realized that they had been mistaken about the Indians, Christianity, and they became less tolerant about their vegetarian foibles. See, the habit was appreciated only in connection to faith. When they realized they are not faithful as they are, so they condemn their vegetarianism. Therefore, another objection I have for veganism, it will undermine the tradition of India for sensitive for human beings and animals. Right? The vegan will take over. Like somebody asked me this question: what is the harm with Jersey cows? Are they not cows? There are some opinion which is I don't agree with them. They said, Jersey cows are not cows. Absolutely, they are cows. But I call them their cows when they are in their country providing all the milk for their people. It is very good. But when they come to India, they become invading cows, just like the Britishers invaded India. Because they stop breeding the native cows. They are also cows, but they've stopped people from breeding your own cows. Right. So therefore, we see again another person, a Portuguese person, having identified its potential, the potential of vegetarianism. As I said, vegetarianism is not anti-non-vegetarianism. And non-vegetarianism is not anti-vegetarian. That is how people lived in the Shastras, in my own experience also, and everywhere. And in the marriages, for that matter, nowadays the modern marriages, people, whether it is vegetarian families, they are throwing banquets of non-veg to them. Is there a problem? Let us not discuss that. Maybe they have large number of friends and families, Western people coming. You know, there are that will not get into. But about 30, 40 years ago, even the Marathas who eat meat, but in the marriage there was a typical food, which is purely vegetarian, right? So there was this semi-vegetarians. Friday you would not eat, Saturday you would not eat, Shravan Mas you would not eat, Kartik Mas you would not eat. It was so nice, and people were not craving. I have to eat now. I have to eat now. I followed that, right? So having identified as a potential, this another visitor, Bernier, was astonished by the advantages of vegetarianism, noticing in particular it was India's greatest military asset, whereas European armies were weighed down with barrels of salted beef and tankards of wine, without which the European soldier would absolutely refuse to fight. Indian armies were perfectly content with readily transportable dried food such as lentils and rice. He looked on with disbelief as Aurangzeb army, because most of the soldiers were Hindus only. Aurangzeb army, immense army transported enough provisions for prodigious and almost incredible number of people. Just see, so therefore, making a big noise about you being vegetarian, making a big noise of you being vegan, is going to simply make the world divide and make them arrogant. You know. So therefore, when we follow the principle of human sensitivity based upon jivo jivasya jivanam, one man's food, one person is food for other person, literally from the non-vegetarian perspective, and sensitively from the perspective of everybody has to contribute to the growth of somebody else. When that is seen from that perspective, then there is no need for this lower kinds of discussions, the veganism, vegetarianism, non-vegetarianism. You focus on the higher values of life, dharma and shraddha. When we do that, then we have the power to interact. Vishwamitra Muni was discussing with a chandala, a dog eater. You read in the Mahabharata, it's a beautiful discussion. A chandala had amazing argument to present to Vishwamitra Muni why he should not eat meat, who is a pure vegetarian. And Vishwamitra Muni, who is a pure vegetarian, is discussing with somebody who is selling the meat of a dog and why he should eat. And if you read the discussion between the two, it's fascinating. Why was Vishwamitra Muni saying? Because there was an emergency, there was nothing to eat. He had to survive. And this dog eater telling Vishwamitra Muni, "Hey, you have lived a pure life. It is better to die, but don't consume this." Can you ever hear this, the modern non vegetarian saying to his friends who are vegetarians? I know many Indians, such sometimes it hurts badly. They want to spoil those who are eating vegetarian food by mixing. Obnoxious behavior. Refined people, if somebody is not drinking wine, they will put some wine in their lemon juice also. Put their wine in their orange juice also. In the modern world, judgment. I quoted this. Justin Langer, the Australian cricket coach, spoke about when Tim Pine was thrown out as a captain, what he went through, how people judged him. And I think the modern world, as much as they call themselves as liberal, giving people to have their opinion, they don't allow that. Our ancestor with all their limitations, whatever limitation they had, because every civilization will have its potentials and their limitation. But whatever limitation they had, in this regard, they were much more mature in dealing with eating meat and appreciating those who are not eating. And those who are vegetarians had a sensitivity not to denigrate those who are eating the meat. I just had gone to Bangalore to visit some place, And one famous scholar's daughter was telling that my father was in a great friendship with one of his other friend from a college. The habit of this other friend was completely different from her father. They would sit and play carom, they would discuss philosophy, they wrote books, and the other person would give introduction to his book. But in regards to food habit, both knew that this friend has a higher principle of not eating, so you would not invite him to eat in his house. And that did not offend him. So they knew the habits of people, they appreciated the habit, but that did not stop their friendship. Here, people, just because you are vegan or you follow certain values, they're willing to break their relationship also. Whether it is faith, whether it is habits, whether it is certain ideology, people want to break. So we have to raise this question with ourselves and others. You know, are we more sensitive compared to the previous generation? Or are we less sensitive and more rabid, more radical in our views to prove and to create our system at the cost of destroying other party? So therefore, apparently there may be environment friendliness in the vegetation, but in regards to human relationship, it is pure butchering. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Very interesting to know that we may practice our beliefs. However, we need to be more inclusive and sensitive to people who think otherwise. Like to invite questions at this point in time. Roji, we following a particular path, we avoid eating certain kinds of food, uh, which makes us insensitive to people who do not practice that. So, for example, if there's a marriage, we would like our daughter to get married to somebody who's a vegetarian. Uh, if we have to give our house on rent, we'll give it to a vegetarian. If we need to decide on the business we need to do, we would prefer to do a business which does not involve meat products because there might be karma which comes along with it. So how does one see all this? Hari bol, Prabhuji?
You're able to hear?
Yes, yes, we can
Yeah,
hear. Prabhuji.
yeah. See, again, therefore, the whole perspective in the modern world has changed. No, which is like, it took for me many years that how I stayed with the pure vegetarians and they had no problem, and I was a non-vegetarian, they had no problem with me, right? There was no that trouble. And even Prabhupada explains about his own sister. She was married in a house where they were non-vegetarians, right? She was crying, "Arey, how can I stay here?" They said, "Don't worry, you don't eat." So the problem was solved instantly about she being a vegetarian or in-laws being non-vegetarian. Prabhupada talks about it, right? So the point is they had a greater maturity to handle a greater diversity. It was not divisiveness, it was a diversity. Now if you get into the philosophy whether one should eat meat or not, that's a different thing, but I'm talking about when you encounter these realities of life, whether it is Bharadwaj Rishi, whether it is Valmiki Maharshi, whether it is Pandavas, whether it is Lord Ramachandra, you see this, right? So therefore the point is here, what is the capacity of your daughter to handle the diversity while maintaining her own values, right? If you find there are 10 other compatibilities in regards to this marriage, and there is a huge incompatibility in regards to habits, when does it become huge? It becomes huge incompatibility not from the world's perspective, it becomes huge incompatibility based upon her capacity to handle it or not. She doesn't have the capacity to handle, don't force to her to marry to somebody who's not. It's not based upon only the belief and philosophy, it's based upon the capacity. All right, so that was an interesting principle. And then once they go there, the husband family also, now we got one more bakra to make them non-vegetarian. This is the modern perspective, unfortunately, right? And therefore there are so much of divisiveness instantly for no good reason, where people don't want to compliment with each others also. Like even if there are non-vegetarians, like I'm giving my own example, there was clarity of when to cook, how to cook. It stinks. For me, no more than non-violence, it's dirty. No. So therefore, they used to be very considerate about each other. If somebody is coming in your building, if they are not considerate, then that will create a conflict. They are not sensitive to your habits, and you are not sensitive to their habit. That's a problem. And our judgment will only happen based upon one perspective. And there could be a nice, pure people who are eating pure vegetarian food, but so small minded, they don't stink in their from the kitchen, but they stink in their psychology. No? So therefore, all this thing principle has to be, Prabhupada kept his food. I visited that house, went to that place. He kept his food in the refrigerator of Sally Agarwal where they would keep the meat. And he would say, never mind, never mind, never mind. He was not compromising. He was basically cooperating because they were cooperating with him. That's one of the best examples also. All right. So therefore, when sometime our newfound habits makes us more and more small minded and narrow. Therefore that's a difference between a culture and a cult. Cult makes you narrow minded. Culture makes you, develop the power naturally to integrate with others without compromising your life. Bharadaraja Rishi never said, okay, what a taste, I want to, it's smelling so good, I want to eat. It didn't bother him. It was not a problem of they eating meat and he would not eat. Just see, Aurangzeb army is talking about that. In Indian army also, it's the only army where there are pure vegetarian. One of our friend, you know, he was in the Air Force, pure vegetarian. Nobody forced him. Sometimes the friends may jokingly say, now it has become more and more. It has become a system now. If it's a vegetarian, bring him down. No, so that has to be understood carefully. At least we have to contemplate on these principles. And then comes the implementation. If our understanding itself is wrong, what to speak of implementation?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. It's all about our capacity to deal with the diversity around us. I would like to invite questions at this point in time. Rajmohan Prabhuji, can you just help us with granting permission to people who would like to ask questions?
Yes, then you just need to press on the request to speak button
Yeah.
on the left. There's a mic button. So you just need to press that. So we'll get the request from them and we will be able to grant them the permission.
Do we have any questions?
Yes, there is one request.
Yeah. Saurabhji, can you please ask your question?
Please unmute and ask.
Yeah.
Saurabh?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Prabhuji, thank you very, very much for this class. Prabhuji, I have two questions. Now, the thing which you mentioned about Prabhupada, so similarly, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur also for preaching for the English tradition, he didn't mind arrangements for them also, to be served like tea for something like
I
that.
can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, am I audible now?
Yeah,
Please.
better.
Yeah. Prabhuji, this example which he gave you, so similarly, this also is the same concept that when Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to preach to the white Britishers or other this thing, so he also didn't mind arrangements being made for beef to be served for them or like that.
The spirit was there. He never served it. You have to understand.
Okay, Prabhuji.
The spirit was there. The understanding was there
Okay, Prabhuji.
because they enjoyed the nice food. No. However hardcore non-vegetarian one may be, but if they receive very nicely cooked vegetarian food at least once, they will enjoy it. That's not a problem. But the spirit was, yes. The spirit was the same.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have Geeta Wise. I do not know his or her name. Can you please ask your question?
Yes, Prabhu, this is Amrita Gaurangadi. So, Prabhu, for practicality purposes, if we are trying to inspire people to chant and to start on the sadhana bhakti, and they're already eating meat, so we should definitely discourage them from eating, correct?
We begin with the philosophy of spirituality rather than focusing on their habits.
Okay.
No.
So, if they want to
Yeah.
serve in the mission that we are doing, it's okay for them to start serving, though they're having those non-vegetarian habits.
There are people in one of the center I know. They are coming from the coastal area. Their profession is itself is to sell meat, to give the sell fish. So now instantly they can't give up because they'll be starving, and the temple is not going to take responsibility of caring for them. So they come to the temple, they do all this seva little bit also. They go, they are looking for another alternative profession. Sometimes people may say just depend on Krishna. The guy who says that, he walks away without taking the responsibility. So therefore, again, the sensitivity, the purpose. Lord Chaitanya, did he tell a fisherman to give up? He was chanting Narsinga mantra, right? Mahaprabhu did not get into his life. And I was giving another, I forgot to mention this, in Udupi area, where Udupi temple is there. There it's a full of coastal place. Hundreds and thousands of fishermen is there. I remember doing a program many years ago that there was a fisherman's colony, and Vadiraj Swami, allowed them to worship Matsya Avatar. Huh? And the pujaris were worshipping the deities. They're from their community only. So these people who were worshipping, they became vegetarian, but they did not give up their profession of being fishermen. Because how many people will stop, where you, if your mission is to make everybody vegetarian and also devotee, you can say if they have to be part of an organization plus they want to be initiated, then they have to follow. But if somebody wants to love Krishna in their own way, they can chant Krishna's name, they can chant Vittal's name, they can chant Balaji's name, and as they progress slowly, if they have the capacity to handle the philosophy, then you talk about you know the philosophy of vegetarianism, the philosophy of how to practice the four regulative principle of compassion, austerity, truthfulness, right? So therefore, that way you'll interact with more people. Therefore, you have to see how Chaitanya interacted with people in Bengal also.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Suniji, can you please ask your question? Okay, I think Sunichi has decided not to ask. Saurabhji, can you please ask your question? You possibly have one more question to ask.
Yes, Prabhuji. Now, am I audible?
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Prabhuji, just one more thing. This Vyadha, this what you mentioned. So when the sage and he, with his anger, he burns the bird and when he goes. So how does that Mataji, that Grahastha lady, come to know that no, I am not that like that bird whom you can burn with your eyes, and then he goes forward and she guides him towards that Vyadha. So how does that lady, that Mataji, know that he is that sage who burnt the bird with his
No,
anger?
sensitivity is simple. If you're doing your duties properly, then the duty itself, the duty becomes yajna, and the yajna has the power to give you the gut feeling. So human being becomes sensitive, just like when the story of what's her name, our Shabari, giving fruits to Lord Ramachandra, Valmiki Maharshi doesn't say that she was tasting and giving. Any gardener knows which fruits of his garden will be more tastier without even tasting. Very simple. I can tell you, now also I know which coconut is spoiled or not spoiled, which is more thicker or more thinner inside the. Why? Because you develop that gut feeling based upon certain permutation and combination, and you rarely fail in that. So similarly, if I can figure out what is coconut inside, or people can figure out whether there is water or not here in the field, and what to speak of that lady who was such devout in regards to her dharma and duty, she could easily sensitize herself and figure out that this person has certain, challenges.
Thank you very much. Ram Gopalji, can you please ask your question?
Last question. We'll stop.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Prabhuji, I just want to ask a very simple question regarding vegetarianism. How do we encourage, how do you preach vegetarianism to normal or laymen?
Yeah. Again, see that because there is an aggressiveness about non-vegetarianism,
Okay.
where people have become so aggressive about being non-vegetarianism. So unfortunately, it's our understanding has to be very clear. Whatever we discuss, that understanding is there in the scripture, because people are living in like how the modern technology is going towards blockchains now, or decentralized system, right? It will be a new revolution where people like Amazon and Facebook will not be controlling. So it's a beautiful discussion which is happening. I was talking to one scientist who is from the artificial intelligence, right?
Yes.
So blockchain. So similarly, Similarly, now the world is all, just see, Ram Gopal Verma makes a tweet.
Yes.
It didn't matter to us 50 years ago what people believe and don't believe. But now, because his belief will be placed on Twitter, he's sitting somewhere, and then he's making a tweet. So then there'll be people will be forced to counter his tweet. So it becomes a war of opinions rather than the transformation of each other. वो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन नहीं होता. सो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन के लिए, फॉर द ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, there has to be an education. If you are willing to give time to people to discuss sensitively, Narad Muni could transform Mrigahari, but it took time. We want no time. Instantly, we want to change. It is easier to change people from non-vegetarian and make them vegan because it's a cult.
Yes, bro.
Right. Yeah. No, it is very easier for people to become vegetarian to non-vegetarian. It is easier for people from no drinking to drinking. But from drinking to no drinking, from non-vegetarian to vegetarian, our policy, as far as I understand, more than aggression, it's an education which is more important, because education has the foundational principle of sensitivity, and aggression doesn't have. When you bring somebody with aggression to be from non-vegetarian to vegetarian, his whole life becomes an aggression towards other, because of his belief system. So it's an educational centric approach where people change, but while changing, they continue to remain sensitive to their surrounding and to other people also, especially our own family members, who may be non-vegetarians, right? There are people who have not taken food from their own mother's hand because they are non-vegetarian, even though they're willing to provide them vegetarian, right?
Yes,
So
bro.
therefore, it's an organic process. Growth has to be always based upon organic evolving, and breaking will always be aggressive. Breaking takes, in our Kannada there is a saying that Kumbharanige Varusha, Donnege Nimisha. It takes a long time for a potter to make a pot, but it takes no time to break it. So breaking a tradition, whether it is commercialized non-veg or commercialized vegan, it doesn't make much time. But tradition to build, to sustain, to grow, it's a slow process. It's a bullock cart process that we cannot change. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, can we take one last question? There's one person who'd like to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, Akshayji, can you please ask a question?
Hare Krishna, bro. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Prabhuji, I just want one clarification. Is my understanding correct or not? That in previous ages, the animals were sacrificed, so that they could get the higher forms of life, for suppose human or other forms of life. And whether if these practices are practiced in Kali Yuga, does this work or not? So this
There's
was
a difference between being a meat eater and offering it to devatas and doing in sacrifice. They're two different things. We did not discuss about the animal sacrifice. It was the greatness of the rishis. If I am a non-vegetarian, then they would create a festival surrounding that non-vegetarianism to offer their animal to devis or devatas, right? And eat their prasad. That is not yagya. That is simply ordinary. You can call it yagya, but not the yagya of Gomeda yagya and Ashwamedha yagya. The Ashwamedha yagya and Gomeda yagya, the animals would get a higher, they would reborn or they would get into a higher. But as a meat eater, if you are eating meat and offering it to devatas, is simply making them slowly refined. What would happen to animals? They are killed. They go to the next species of their life according to whatever they would be basically moving on. It is not that they would get higher forms of life. If you are slaughtering 10,000 animals in a big festival, it is not like Ashwamedha Yagya and Gomedha Yagya. They're two different. It is just to help the non-vegetarian person to be connected to the higher realms of reality. The animals would not, as far as I understand, they would not get much benefit out of this.
okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Truly, our spirituality is about being cohesive and inclusive. We meet again on Tuesday next, very close to Republic Day, to discuss the concept of freedom of speech. What is responsible freedom of speech? Till then, thank you and Hare Krishna.